Hello, hello, and welcome back to another podcast episode of Overpowering Emotions, where I talk all things big emotions, emotion regulation. I am picking away at our little sub mini series on the different functions of emotions. Last week, I discussed pleasant, low energy emotions and high energy emotions. So be sure to check that out if you missed it. Next, today, I'm going to be focusing on the unpleasant and high energy emotions. These are the sort of emotions that are like a storm, right? If we were going to continue with a weather map, they often come fast, they often come loud, they're full of energy that pushes towards action, whether it's running away or yelling or slamming doors or becoming aggressive. These emotions are the body's way of saying something's wrong. Do something now. We really need to make sure that we're not shutting it down. These ones are usually the most problematic in terms of how adults respond. I do a lot of behavior workshops, and I'm always talking about how problematic it is when we're always putting kids on a behavior plan and trying to eliminate the behavior without understanding the underlying emotional need that's going on here. It's like I often will show that picture of, two people at the forefront of the screen trying to clean up this mess of water, but meanwhile, the water is overflowing in the background. No one's actually addressing where the problem is coming from in the first place. Behaviors are just what we see. It's like a tip of an iceberg in the ocean. The most obvious feelings, like anger, is what we see. But underneath that iceberg, the larger part below, it's hidden. It's way deeper. It's often way more vulnerable, right? We see more vulnerable feelings like fear and sadness and shame or disappointment. Oftentimes there's fear of rejection. So it's just easier for me to be loud and aggressive and reject you and push you away than to be rejected, which is way more vulnerable, isn't it? It's the greatest fear that we have. It's physiologically the worst feeling that we could ever feel. So the best overarching strategy with these emotions, instead of shutting them down, is understanding what's going on. We need to help them pause so we can understand what's going on, and then we can redirect to more appropriate adaptive behaviors. So oftentimes, if they're just so overwhelmed, we just need to give space so that they can get grounded. But whatever we can do to get them grounded, get their prefrontal cortex back online, maybe it's safe movement. We got to use up that energy. So moving is always great. Validating their boundaries is really important. We want to teach them to ride the wave of emotion, ride that wave of anger that I just want to go and punch and scream without drowning in it and without actually doing those things. And I will be talking about that in coming episodes. But every emotion, even the unpleasant, uncomfortable ones, kids need to understand it's temporary. It's an internal experience that comes and goes, but in the moment when it's there, it's designed to give us information. So when we treat emotions like problems to solve, or if we're trying to eliminate them, that it's bad and they got to go away, we're unintentionally teaching kids that those emotions are unsafe, they're wrong, there's something wrong with you, you're bad, there's something to escape, you need to have control over them. And that's not great. That's not healthy. That's just going to make things worse. Instead, what we actually want kids to learn is it's okay what you're feeling, right? You don't need to react immediately. Emotions rise and fall on their own. And very importantly, you have the capacity to handle the discomfort. I know that we all say it's okay to feel angry, but you can't hit. That's all we do. We don't add on all of those other pieces, right? That we just need to sit with it. It's important that you sit with it so that you're not reacting immediately, so you can figure out what's going on, so that you can figure out what to do next. So when we're inviting kids to sit with that emotion without trying to fix it or avoid it or suppress it or redirect it or whatever in the moment, we're supporting emotional tolerance. This is really important. And I'm going to be spending a whole dedicated episode just on that emotion tolerance, distress tolerance, frustration tolerance, the ability to stay present with that discomfort, because that helps us keep our prefrontal cortex online so that we can make adaptive behaviors. It helps them build their self-awareness. They're noticing what their thoughts are, the body cues, the urges, whatever is arising in that moment. They're able to create some distance, right? So when we can decouple the feeling from reacting, they're learning that emotions don't have to drive behavior. Oftentimes, behaviors are driven by emotion, but they don't have to be. We want to drive the right kinds of behaviors that aren't going to get them in trouble, right? That are actually going to keep the connections and keep them going with what they need to do. So, of course, I mean, emotions point to needs, which I've started talking about already in previous episodes, and I'm going to continue discussing that today with some of these unpleasant emotions. But we don't always have to act on those needs immediately. That's why we want to create space. So, when we allow for space to just feel, that's what we're filling the space with. It's to feel. We're keeping our prefrontal cortex online and we're gaining clarity about whether the perceived need is accurate. Is it urgent? What action, if any, is actually going to be helpful in this moment? And how am I going to meet the need in a values based, calm way that's important to me? So if a kiddo feels lonely at school, instead of rushing to fix it with instant reassurance or how much we love them or distraction or trying to get them to play with a friend, we're going to sit with that loneliness with them. It's going to be helpful probably, but we're going to validate the hurt. If they were rejected, they weren't allowed to go play basketball. Instead of getting mad at the other kids, let him play basketball. Those other kids are just going to resent Johnny even more, right? Especially if he can't play very well. We want to validate that hurt. We want to sit with them while they feel it. They need to feel that emotion. And once they can go through that, then we can start building on connection, right? So if we're always rushing to fix a child's emotion, we're sending that message that it's unsafe. You shouldn't be feeling this way. There's something wrong. So we just want to sit with them quietly, patiently, without solving anything, right? So that they can learn all emotions are important. It's part of being human. The goal isn't to feel better right away. It's to get better at feeling. So in practice, you can create those emotional pause moments. Let's just notice this together and say things like, you don't have to do anything right now. Let's just notice what's coming up, right? Let's let that feeling be there for a bit. I'm here while it passes. Maybe make a prediction. How long do you think it's going to take? So after that wave of emotion, we can ask about what that feeling might be telling us. So let's start with anxiety, which I think, I've talked a lot about. I think a lot of us just kind of know that. Anxiety is future oriented, right? This emotion is future oriented. It's preparing the body to detect and respond to potential threats. It's meant to be protective rather than pathological, but it often becomes unhelpful and overgeneralized. And we do things to make it worse, like accommodating and letting kids avoid, right? We're just making it worse. So the function of this anxiety is meant to prepare kids for threat or challenge. Okay. So emotionally, anxiety is saying something bad might happen. Be careful. The underlying need, well, of course, it's safety, it's predictability, it's preparation, it's reassurance, right? Reassurance is a major trap that can fuel anxiety, though. So rather than just telling kids, don't worry, everything's okay, we'll take care of it, they need to be able to explore that fear, that anxiety. They got to get curious with it, validate it, right? So we want to help them with that. And we're going to validate, of course, you feel this way. And we're going to put it back in their lap. We're going to show confidence that they can figure it out. But we are there as guides, right? If to get to the problem solving or just to help with that coaching that they're eventually going to be taking on themselves. So what is it that you need to be more prepared? What is it that you need to feel more supported? We're asking those open-ended questions. Now, some kids will cling to adults. They're going to stay close in known environments for that sense of safety, but then it's limiting opportunities for independence and exploration and figuring things out on their own. So we always want to get on offense. That's really important to create a plan to be able to walk through these what if scenarios, right? And getting them to cope, ground themselves down, keep that prefrontal cortex online. And then what is it that you need to do to be able to tolerate this uncertainty, to still go on that field trip or that sleepover, whatever else it is, without knowing for sure what's going to happen. We want to normalize that uncertainty. Of course, it's, scary when we don't know what's going to happen. If you don't know for sure that you're going to get the bed that you want, or you don't know for sure if you're going to be good at that new game. But we want to help them build a sense of control, right, for their own selves. We want to expose them to these new experiences, right? And we want to make sure we're guiding brave action, not allowing them to run away. And we're going to reinforce any brave behaviors that we do see, helping them keep their prefrontal cortex online so they can shift those what if spirals into if that happens, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do some self coaching. I'm going to say, I've got this, right? So those are just some things. And I will be getting into specific strategies, of course. Right now, it's just understanding, the underlying sort of thing. Frustration is another one that we see here that we see kids struggle with a lot. Now, a signal here is that something isn't working. A goal is blocked. I'm trying to figure out this math problem and I can't get it, or I'm trying to fix my bike and I can't get it. And then we get frustrated. So something's blocked, right? Or some need is not being met, or my effort isn't leading to the expected outcome, right? I'm trying to work on my bike and I'm doing all this work and it's not getting any better. Frustration can often precede anger, but it's usually more about this internal stuckness or maybe a lack of skill. So, and frustration can show up in lots of different ways. It could be putting their head down on their desk, right? Or just going, "Phew." It could be breaking things or just having a huge temper tantrum, right? It's just serving the sort of release valve for the emotion. Because again, it's high energy. We got to get rid of that energy somehow. It's coming out. Emotionally, frustration is saying, I want this to work, but I can't make it happen. So the need here is going to be patience, problem solving. Maybe they need some skill support. Maybe they need clearer communication or encouragement to keep going, to keep at it. Maybe they just need a pause. Probably persisting. When I talk about my frustration formula and perseverance formula, we know that frustration is a signal to the brain, something's not working. So now the brain is alert and it's learning. So we want kids to persist when they're frustrated. It's not just to, avoid and let go and give a break. That's the worst time to give a break. But it's not just about, the Lego tower falling over and now they're frustrated. It's really the gap between what they wanted to happen and what actually happened. So if we're trying to jump in and fix it and brush it off or giving them a break, we're missing a really important opportunity to build this emotional insight and resilience. So, support strategies that adults could be doing would include breaking tasks into smaller steps. Sometimes that's it, just the first step. I can't get started. That big step is still too big. That first step is too big. So we just want to break it down until it's not so big. Maybe we're shifting strategies with open-ended questions. That's what we want to do. What's another way to try this? What would be an easier way to get started? Rather than telling them all the time. We're going to model emotion coaching, right? All the time, I'm saying get frustrated and talk out loud. Show how you are coaching yourself and how you're still persisting and working through it. We can reframe frustration. I'm always like, yes, you're frustrated. That means your brain is online. It's awake. It's learning because something isn't going on. So it's trying to figure out how to fix this. Right. So that's really my persistence formula. I've got a whole episode on it if you want to hear more about that. But we want to get to that self-coaching piece. That's going to be really important, right? Where we're normalizing the emotion. We want them to be able to normalize that emotion. And we're going to use that emotion coaching language like, man, the stuck part really showed up right now. What do you need to help that unstuck part or that stuck part get unstuck? Let's figure it out together. If a reset break is absolutely needed, okay, sure, but ideally after they've persisted. Let's try for 5 more minutes. We know that 5 to 7 minutes right after frustration kicks in is like the most powerful learning time for our brain. So let's set the timer for, yes, frustration set in. Let's set the timer for 5 more minutes and then we'll take a break. We'll take a breather and regroup and see what we need to do. Like I said, anger usually quickly follows that frustration. Anger, that the function, it signals some perceived injustice. Maybe there's a threat to autonomy or to a boundary, right? So someone's in my personal space or they're doing something, there's a boundary violation. It's activating the nervous system for protective action. And it's really important for self-advocacy and assertiveness. We need to have that. So emotionally, anger is saying something isn't fair or something isn't right. We need to act now. Something must be done. So those underlying needs, it could be boundary protection. It could be assertive expression of values or needs. Maybe it's validation of some injustice or unfairness. Whether it's a true or actual or not, that's the perception, right? But there's something going on here. So here, that pause, creating that distance, that pause before the blast, so that they can express themselves assertively, we want them to be able to name what's going on for them and name the situation and maybe the injustice that happened. We can teach them assertiveness skills. Maybe they're practicing assertiveness scripts. That can be really helpful, to be able to talk about how I'm feeling rather than act out how I'm feeling, right? So, what is it that I need? How can I be assertive with what that need is? How can I set healthy boundaries that are going to be listened to so I'm not getting in trouble and sent to the principal's office? So we're modeling this language. That's really important. We're, of course, normalizing that anger. It's an alert system, it's not a behavior problem. So we really want to make sure we're addressing that. We want to use movement again with these high energy, different emotions. We always want to use movement to help release energy. We just don't want them to do any angry movements like screaming or punching, or punching I hear that all the time. Oh, they're always so angry. So we gave them a punching bag or we're getting them to scream into a pillow. But we're probably just heightening that energy already. We could just be adding more fuel to the fire and making them more aggressive. So we got to be really careful. How can we use up that energy and get them moving in more adaptive ways? Overwhelm is another one, right? We talk about overwhelm all the time. So it usually shows up when the demands that are placed on us, we're perceiving them as too much. It exceeds my capacity to cope. So, overwhelm, it's really a sign that the nervous system is overactivated and under resourced. Emotionally, it's saying this is too much. I just can't keep up. So, the needs here, well, it could be a reduction in demands, right? We don't want to flood them and overwhelm them so much that they just shut down. So, sometimes there is a reduction in demands, but we're going to be building that back up. More structure, more clarity. We're going to help with prioritization. We're going to be co-regulating. We're going to create environmental calm. So those are different examples of what some of those needs are. Support strategies, well, it could be helping them sort your must do things, your can wait do things, the let go things. I do this with adults all the time. What must you do? What can be delegated? What can be let go, right? And then if those must do, we're going to create a structured plan. So your brain knows exactly what it needs to do without getting overwhelmed. So using visual planners to help create clarity, to help prevent that overload can be really helpful. So that's just an example. A lot of strategies really are taking pen to paper and problem solving. Let's make a plan. Let's write it out, get it on paper. Let's visualize rather than staying in our head trying to problem solve, which is really just ruminating and it's not solving any problems. It's just making things worse. Jealousy or envy fall into this category too. I think it's helpful just to have a quick distinction here. Envy is usually more about wanting what someone else has, and jealousy is more about fear of losing what you do have. So the emotional functions and needs are probably a little bit different. Envy really arises when someone else has something that we want. It could be a trait, it could be a success, an achievement, it could be an experience, it could be needs, it could be anything. It can be destructive, but it can also motivate self-improvement depending on how it's handled, right? Emotionally, it's saying, I want that too. I just feel like I can't have it. Envy really needs self-worth. It needs inspiration. It needs awareness of what my strengths are. It needs affirmation, right? I think a little bit of a reframe. What does this tell me about what I value? What's important here? right? Is it success? Is it money? Is it recognition? Is it connection? What is it that I value? And what's that path towards a personal goal based on that value? So, a helpful strategy would really be exploring what is that envy pointing to, naming the value underneath it, and helping them set those personal goals or affirming their own strengths to convert comparison into inspiration or into self affirmation. We definitely want to reduce social comparison through self focus. What's meaningful for me or for you, right? If we're working with them. Jealousy, like I said, it usually arises when we're worried about losing something that's really valuable to us. It could be a possession, it could be relationship, and we're losing it to somebody else. So now we're really wanting to preserve that connection or the status or the thing that we're perceiving, often in perceived competition. So emotionally, jealousy is really saying, I'm afraid something or someone is going to be taken away from me. So it's serving to protect valued relationships, right? Or whatever's valued to us. So understanding that can really help us better address issues that are coming up, maybe around trust and commitment. Jealousy, the needs, safety, connection, affirmation of belonging, affirmation of value, clarification of relationships. So we want to affirm the relationship, but not in the heat of the moment, right? Because we can get into this really vicious trap proactively when they're actually feeling good, right? And feeling connected. We want to make sure we're affirming the relationship. We want to make sure we're proactively having relational rituals, one-to-one time. We want to invite perspective taking, right? That's going to be really helpful to strengthen security. We want to make sure we're addressing misinterpretations of exclusion, all done proactively. A relationship killer, often like we see the envy or jealousy or other things that come up, but a relationship killer is resentment. And resentment is really this prolonged anger that's combined with powerlessness or with unexpressed boundaries. People aren't being assertive. So it's really signaling repeated or unresolved experiences of it could be unfairness or emotional labor. Emotionally, it's really saying I've put in too much time or effort and it's eating away at me. So the needs here include acknowledgement of the emotional burden, some assertiveness training, boundary setting, a space to express unspoken frustration. So, an important strategy would really be able to identify the boundary that was crossed and being able to practice assertive scripts. Maybe there's some journaling to release built up emotion. We want to rebuild a sense of agency. What do you want to happen next? How can we move towards that resolution and self protection? Right? That's going to be really important. We want to make sure we're modeling. How do we say no? How do we express our limits clearly? So there's a rundown of some of the common unpleasant, high energy emotions. Oftentimes these are misunderstood as negative, but they're signals. We always got to remember emotions are signals. Maybe a child struggling with autonomy or safety or fairness. And so when we're seeing behaviors, they are adaptive for kids right now, especially if they're repeating in the same behaviors. We might not like them, but they're adaptive for them somehow. We just need to figure out what need is that behavior addressing so that we can fill that need. Because if we don't want to try to eliminate it without understanding what that underlying need is. So we have to pause and ask, what is this emotion and the accompanying behavior trying to protect? What is it trying to communicate? So we adults can stop reacting to the behavior in unhelpful ways and start responding to the human need underlying it. Lots to think about. I know I still have to get to some other ones like unpleasant low energy. There's lots in there, and I want to make sure I'm taking time to explore some of these unpleasant ones just because we often misinterpret them. But I'll leave it there for now, for today. Check out any of the resources from week to week that I have. I'm having loads of different resources that you can use to explore some of the functions a little bit more closely. In the meantime, help those kiddos be bold and courageous, and I will see you next week.